we've got two speakers rather than four because sadly Nico de Pedro, who we were expecting today, and Laila Nachawati from Spain, both are in Spain, both are colleagues of each other. Nicholas, his father, passed away due to COVID, and I suggested that to Laila that she needs to stay close to Nicholas and assist Nicholas with whatever is needed. So we're going to have Milton Bearden and Tony Shaffer to speak for about 12 to 15 minutes each. And followed, we're going to have a little kind of discussion afterwards, maybe with some members on this Zoom. And we'll open it up to the audience with questions and answers afterwards. I hope everyone's okay with that. So basically, fake news, proliferation and the viral spread of fake news, false information passed off as factual, is a global problem. It's accelerated by information and communications technology, such as Facebook, Twitter, and various other things that enables kind of near instant and easily disguised messaging that can affect a lot of people, nations, and maybe lead to wars or other types of issues. So we're going to start first of all with, who do I pick on first? Tony, shall I pick on yourself or shall I pick on Milton to go first?
Milton, it's up to you guys. I'm open to however you'd all want to do. So
either way you want to do, Mohammed.
Let's go with Milton. Milton's the senior guy here.
So. That's right, Milton. You're very senior.
All right, I've got it. Disinformation. I got into CIA a few years after the Berlin Wall went up, and spent the next 30 years until about a handful of years after the Berlin Wall came down, in one way or another engaged against what we call the main enemy, and the Soviet Union, who also called us the main enemy or the main adversary. Part of that engagement involved, on our part, covert actions. Covert actions can be anything from propaganda campaigns to an actual shooting war, as in Afghanistan during the 10-year occupation of that country by the Soviet Union. The Soviets, on their side, called it active measures. And we were engaged against each other, hammer and tong, for almost that entire period. Now, today what we're talking about is disinformation or covert action or active measures. And in this regard, these are themes that either pop up on their own or are created out of whole cloth and run against the adversary. I think the better ones are ones that sort of had a bubbling start on their own, and then either side began to pick up on them and use them in their active measures or covert action themes. Let me give you a couple of examples of that. Take Africa and HIV. When the HIV epidemic started its expansion in Africa, the Soviet active measures picked up on that and said that it was the result of experiments by the Americans. It had a major effect in parts of Black Africa where the epidemic got its foothold, but moreover, it gained traction in the United States, where America's Black population was also targeted by the Soviet Union. So that's an example of something that occurs and then is exploited by one side or the other. On the other side of that, let's go fast forward to Afghanistan, where I was managing the American covert action from 1986 until the Soviets left in 1989. At one point around 1986, Afghan children were becoming injured in greater numbers by butterfly bombs. These are anti-personnel bombs dropped from helicopters in the mountains and valleys of Afghanistan. And they look like a little green butterfly, and it spins on the way down, hits the ground, strikes a plunger, and arms it. So the next person that comes along and disturbs it or picks it up is going to have it blow up. Afghan children out in the valleys and the hills tending their goats would find these and reach down, pick it up, and have a terrible result, loss of a hand. And so instantly the story became toy bombs, that the Russians were dropping munitions that looked like toys for the express purpose of injuring Afghan children. This was picked up by the international media, and everybody from the New York Times to Harvard Crimson to 60 Minutes was all over this. Some reporters were even able to cook up demonstrations of what looked like a matryoshka doll, a stack doll, blowing up when it was disturbed with a long pole. All of it happened to be bogus. The reality was these were butterfly bombs, shameless copies of an American device that was used in great numbers in Vietnam. But the story would never go away. It had its own life and continued to roll, and all that the CIA had to do was to stand back and let it have its own play worldwide. CIA had a problem with these kind of stories because Congress had long ago imposed upon us restrictions that we could never engage in any covert action or propaganda theme that would be played in the United States. That meant that we should avoid even English language newspapers so that it wouldn't be picked up by the American press and played to the American people. But we kept our fingerprints off of the toy bomb story, and in effect, never had to do anything except stand back and watch it play out. On the other side of that one, in the recent Afghan adventure by the Soviets or by the United States, you've all read that the Soviets are paying bounties to Taliban to kill American soldiers. This is another wonderful story that happens to be absolutely bogus, in my opinion. The reality is that since 2015, far fewer Americans have been killed in Afghanistan than they have in normal training throughout the rest of the world. And hardly anybody, I think, injured or killed in the last year. So if it was a Soviet or a Russian effort to pay bounties to the Taliban to kill Americans, they're not getting their money's worth. But in effect, I think, I'm convinced it's another bogus story, but it's this one then was able to bleed over into American politics. And it became not that the Russians were paying bounties to Taliban to kill Americans, but what was Donald Trump doing about it? Or did he know? If he did know, did he raise it with Putin? If he didn't raise it with Putin, all of that back and forth. So the story didn't become pointing a finger at the Russians as much as pointing a finger in American politics. So that's where you get from disinformation that is created by an event that becomes exploited into then the great fake news world that we live in today. where these kind of events are played and replayed politically in whatever target group you've got. So this whole disinformation and covert action and active measures business is a reasonably ancient game, but now with internet and the broad ability for instant replay and to affect larger and larger numbers of people, it becomes more important. And I think even today, the Russians and the internet, they've got a very good handle on how to manage the internet in their own covert action or active measures themes. So let me leave it at that point and turn it over to Tony and see where we go from here.
Milt, thank you for that. And Mohammed, thank you for hosting this. Many of you know I'm a CIA trained case officer. I served in DOD. So, well, Milt and I think, have a lot of common issues. The way we applied our skills are a little bit different. And the way to kind of best illustrate the difference, I think, is by referencing even an older active measures operation called Operation Bodyguard. Operation Bodyguard, there's a great book out, Anthony K. Brown, book's called The Bodyguard of Lies. It lies, and it's basically the deception campaign used by the Allies during World War II to hide the Overlord operation. Everything that you can think of regarding deception, manipulation, it's all in there. And to Milt's point, we've all done this before. The thing that makes it, I think, much more viral is the internet, is the technology now that makes the sharing of information, whether it be good, bad, accurate, inaccurate, rapid. It can be everywhere, literally at the speed of light. So I think that's why we see this epidemic, if you will, of information. So again, it's nothing that's not that governments, individuals, organizations have not engaged in before. It's just much more rapid. And I think the social media outlets combined with bad intent, I'll just be clear on this. I think there are folks out there who use these methods for purposes of upending and not understanding. And that may sound a bit ironic coming from an intelligence officer, but one of the things that I recognized, and one of the reasons I became an intelligence officer, was a thirst for the truth. One of the things I noted in high school, I went to high school in Lisbon, Portugal, and I watched during those days, the Cold War days, intelligence operations happening before my eyes. And this was late 70s. And it was very interesting. And I recognized I just wanted to know what the truth is. And sometimes, and Milt will, I think, agree with me, sometimes you got to hide the truth to get the truth, but never forget what the truth is. And that's part of the problem we face today, is that I think we've seen people come on who have political motivations, who really don't necessarily can separate what objective truth is versus what they want the truth to be. And I think that's something that has contaminated our thinking as no matter where you are on the political spectrum. Both sides of the political spectrum do this. So I think it's important to recognize the reality which we live in, and then seek to find ways we can accommodate our own interests to find the truth, to push us back in that direction. During the time I served as an intelligence officer, I would come up with facts and findings that were very inconvenient to the political goals of the people I worked for. But it was not my obligation to change those, to shade those. My job was to tell the truth. And again, we who are committed to the truth need to understand that certain elements within our society are committed to this woke ideology. Woke ideology is not truthful in any way. And I'm going to circle back to the deception issue via woke. So whenever you start looking at a set of facts, it's important to understand what those facts are, a baseline, if you will, of what what objective reality is. The moment you decide to abandon objective reality and decide that you're going to act politically, you've compromised yourself as a human being. I think you've compromised any organization you stand for the moment you depart from that. You can argue the facts any way you want. You can say, well, white is white and I don't like this shade of white, that's fine. But when the moment you say, well, this is white, but it's really, I'm going to tell people it's black and I'm going to be very convincing about it, you've crossed the line. And I will reference back, for some of you who are as old as I am, a great TV series which illustrates this. It was called The Prisoner. James McGowan and the folks back years ago recognized the danger of trying to use the truth in a way that's not healthy. So as we go through this, we need to recognize that the media becomes the conduit for information that they sometimes become essentially a conspirator to spread. Milton mentioned some of the ways that the media has been used to shape things behind the scenes. In the current generation of media, the current constellation of information, we have folks now who in the media will knowingly take a lie and run with it. I had the question, I was doing an interview on KABC radio 2 days ago, I think, where I was asked the question, how is it that nobody in the US government's being held accountable for leaking? And the answer is they're not leaking. They're not actually putting out classified information. They're lying. And Milton mentioned this whole issue of the bounty on the heads of Americans. There's nobody, no credible reporter has said that's real. As a matter of fact, I was talking to a mainstream reporter this morning and was verified to me again that there was no evidence that this was credible. And they had reported this last year, but was ignored. So that's the issue. When you have anonymous sources who are given weight by the media, then you are literally tearing up the very fabric which is important for people to use to try to understand the reality in which we live. And let me be very clear on that. We have the members of the media who are knowingly accepting false information, anonymous information, which is very likely false, and amplifying it. And that's what is so bloody dangerous to the way we as human beings have to recognize and try to discern what's going on. And so it's not a leak if you're lying. Technically, you're just lying. And I think this circles back to this soft deception that we've seen played out across the board, whether it be something relating to Putin. And don't get me wrong, I'm not defending Putin. Putin is a thug. People I've spoken to say that Putin has personally killed people in elevators in Moscow that he disagreed with. So I'm not defending him. What I'm saying is we have to objectively examine what Putin is, how he acts, and are these things that are being attributed to him, or the Russians actually real? And the whole Russian narrative, in my judgment, during the Trump administration was a complete unhelpful use of manipulation of facts and behind the scene anonymous sources damaging us. So I think that's the big things, the big issues I wanted to put out there, is that we need to hold those who provide us information accountable. They have to be willing to ask hard questions, not accept anonymous information. And I'll close on this. One of the reasons that some of these anonymous sources get so much weight is because they come from very senior people who are in positions of authority. So when someone, say, John Brennan, James Comey, Peter Strzok pick up the phone to a reporter and say something, people tend to believe that it's true. And this has been something proven over and again, that these people were willing to lie. They were willing to use their position of authority and not give up classified information, because as we know from hearings last year, when they got in front of Congress and took the oath, they said, oh no, we were lying. We didn't give out anything classified. That's dangerous. And while I think Milton and I would agree that some of the operations we've seen has very specific objectives that were tied to things which we believed at the time, and I think for the most part were tied to trying to do things, the right thing for our countries and our allies, a lot of this other stuff is not meant to actually achieve any favorable outcome. It's all about chaos. It's all about just creating hate, discontent, and fear. And fear is one of the biggest challenges we have to face, is overcoming that. So again, thank you for allowing me this time to talk about this, and I look forward to trying to answer some questions as we move out.
Let me, if I might, at a point here that, if I can turn that off. At a point here on this, there, and it's this. I think that we have to understand that we're part of this. That tribalism is a huge part of where we are today
for some reason.
In the United States. The issue between the old Soviet Union and the United States back in covert action and active measures days was actually tribal too. It was the shirts and the skins. It was the red and the white. It was one side against the other, and almost anything was okay. It wasn't necessarily that it had to be true, but would it play? Would people believe it and run with it? They did it that way, and we did it that way. Now, the problem today is that in America, we've gotten into the shirts and the skins. I don't know if it's easy to go to Sunday dinner in an American family today where the mother will vote Democrat and the father will vote Republican, and they'll all sit down and have a nice chicken dinner on Sunday. Those days might be getting a little bit becoming part of the past. But what we have now is a massive capability in the internet and Facebook and Twitter and all of this for stuff that can be true, or can it be, will it play? And that's what I think that Tony is referring to, is that this is now something that's all come home, and it's shirts and skins in America, and no longer has anything to do with its origins in the days of the Cold War. It's American tribalism that I think makes this thing so dangerous for us. And let me just throw that into the mix.
I agree. Mohammed, you're on mute.
Sorry, guys. I think Mohammed's having a little trouble with the internet. So we did not anticipate that. No, it's very good point what you're making there, because I mean, it's become, with the internet these days, it's become like a free-for-all. So you got all these different ideas out there, and through platforms like YouTube, they're all given like equal footing. When, of course, in reality, there's a big difference between information that comes out of a scientific institution that is credible, or, you know, a credible news source that's actually been properly researched and they've checked their sources, and information that's come out of, you know, some guy in his bedroom that's just made some stuff up and made some nice glossy video, perhaps in Adobe Premiere. But it's, and that's on the one hand. And then you've got the people that are malicious, and you've got all these various channels around the world that are, without mentioning names, but they're masquerading as if they are real news channels. And they have audiences, and it's a serious problem. And it is feeding tribalism, as Milton says. It's feeding. People are becoming like in their own echo chambers. This is the thing that I've witnessed, and they're not often talking to people outside of that. So it just reinforces what they're saying, rather than actually, rather than actually seeing that actually there's other facts out there that they're not taking into account, that they should be taking into account. They're just, you know, repeating the same stuff back to themselves, or the other people within that group or forum or echo chamber. And that's their picture of reality. They don't realize that reality is much broader than that. And of course, that can be dangerous because it does reinforce certain ideas. And if there's malicious intent involved as well, then that can be very serious.
Paul, if I could jump in, one of the things that I recognize is the importance of citizen journalists. One of the problems we've faced in our system is official media taking a political position, which is very dangerous. I would argue.
I would agree with that too.
Any outlet, and I've seen BBC do it too. You know, by the way, I've been on with BBC, and
we know about that in the UK.
I'm just saying, it's like I've had good interviews and bad interviews on BBC. And by the way, what the heck happened to Doctor Who? Just saying. I don't want to go down that path. I don't want to go down that path. But as someone who's consumed British media, I am all for debate, discussion, and disclosure of what someone's perspective is. But that's the problem when a news outlet decides they're going to take a political position and hide it within what they consider factual reporting. And, you know, I've experienced this directly. And again, I'm friendly with some of these folks. One of the folks you guys may, you know, I consider myself on fairly good terms with Jim Acosta, CNN Jim Acosta. Jim and I get along. We've rode the train together, but I disagree with the way his network asks him to portray certain things. And that's where it becomes dangerous. So you have both extremes. You have official networks, some of the big letters, and you have citizen journalists who have their own agenda. And like you said, they can actually get the same weight via social media. So that's where I think, you know, I find myself dealing with people like you, Paul, like with Mohammed, with Milt. We're simply trying to figure out what the truth is. One of the people I've spent some time with in her office before she stepped down is Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi, I believe to be a very honest person with great experience, but some of the folks on her side hate her because she simply refuses to accept propaganda. She will ask hard questions and try to get to the truth. That's the kind of person, well, I may not agree with her politically, that's the kind of person I want to work with regarding just having a conscientious debate of facts so we can actually try to achieve something. Within our disagreement, we hope we can achieve something coming out of it that will benefit others. So.
Well, we had an issue in the UK with the BBC for a number of years because they kept screening someone in London who had a little crew of about 16 followers or something. And they portrayed him as the leader of British Muslims. And, you know, most British Muslims regard him as a complete nut. You know, we don't take him seriously. And yet he was put on there. Anytime there was an issue about Islam, it's like, what do you think, Mr. Chowdhury? And he's like, why are you asking him?
The thing is, that's a huge problem for us, not just for Muslims. I think for quite a lot
it could
of
be
us.
any group. I mean, it's just something that was on forefront of my mind that it's very clearly, it was basically giving him advertising space, free.
Absolutely.
For dangerous ideas. And it could have been anybody. It could have been someone who was promoting, you know, well, actually he's anti-democratic, but he could have been promoting something else. He could have been promoting communism. He could have been promoting all sorts of things. It just so happened to be that he was promoting ISIS.
Yeah, don't know. I mean, he had about 110 followers or something. And there's nearly 3 million Muslims in the UK, which is a bit irritating for us. Anyway, just quickly. So
you're echoing, Mohammed.
I am echoing, aren't I? Okay.
Is that better?
On a second. Yeah, that's much better.
I think what it is you're on here on two things.
Two channels.
Probably.
Because what it is, for some reason, my Zoom, which has never happened before, it keeps restarting. And so I've got the backup Zoom on my telephone, on my mobile, now. So what I was going to say, I mean, with the Anjem Choudhury issue, I mean, here in the UK, with British Muslims, we have had a lot of, let's just say, fake news, misinformation, disinformation beamed in to our communities here. And this is one of the reasons why I thought it would be a good idea to have a few fake news, disinformation, misinformation experts, people who know what's going on, so we can kind of inoculate ourselves with what's happening. Anjem Choudhury is just one. The other thing is that around the time of Brexit, we did have issues around fake news, disinformation, misinformation, and a couple of other times as well. But this is kind of warfare. This is warfare against the UK.
And I would say with Brexit, it was coming from both sides. It was, you know, it wasn't just for, you know, anti-Brexit stuff. There was also pro-Brexit stuff. You know, it was coming from all
absolutely
different angles.
So absolutely. So one of the things, I mean, with Milt and also with Tony, what kind of fake news or disinformation, misinformation that's coming in to the US and trying to get the different communities in the US against each other? What kind of stuff is happening there, and what is being kind of dealt with by the government or by yourselves or your colleagues to kind of stop that? So, Milt?
Yeah, well, everything in America is now into political tribalism, I think. And at the same moment, we've reached a point in the development of the media is that every American of any persuasion whatsoever has his or her place to go for news. In my day as a kid, you got up, or at 6:30 at night, you would watch either Huntley and Brinkley or Walter Cronkite. That was about it. Today, your choices are that you only can go to one place, whether it's MSNBC or it's Fox News, or it's any number of 100 places on the internet to go. But where these things come out from disinformation that then can morph into misinformation. Disinformation is where people are actually saying, okay, we're going to put this out there. And let's take, for example, Barack Hussein Obama, a Muslim born in Kenya, okay? That is and was believed by a very large number of people, regardless of whether there was a birth certificate in Hawaii or anything. So if my Aunt Agnes in Kansas City believes that Barack Hussein Obama was born in Kenya and is a Muslim, that's the morphing of disinformation into my Aunt Agnes being misinformed. I think that argument is over, but it's still got the two groups in America. So, and I think the last 4 years of the Trump administration only exaggerated it from both sides. I mean, you look, and the willingness for us to lie to each other and just to see how it will play is amazing as America. It's back to my chicken dinner on Sunday thing that no longer happens, I guess. And I don't know how that, maybe Tony has some ideas on how do we outgrow this or get out of it or just learn to deal with it.
Yeah, Mel, thank you for that. I am not an academic, but I think an academic review of some of this without making it academic, let me explain that is the best way to do it. I actually work with Rutgers University in New Jersey on issues relating to economics. And so much of what goes on in our lives relate to economics. It really does. The business school there is looking at some of this. And they like me have set aside kind of like this whole let's presume something. They want to study it. And one of the big issues that I've seen is China. China seems behind the scenes economically, politically, and media-wise working to very much encourage the chaos. During the Cold War, we saw in Germany the Soviets funding a great deal of the chaos there. I, as a very young lieutenant, was working chasing terrorists in Germany that were being funded by the Soviets. The Soviets were very much funding a lot of that. So now China has picked up and taken on that role here in the United States, and we recognize their influence economically as well as social-wise to be part of this. So we actually have academic allies wanting to look at what fuels some of this tribalism, because I think that I'm not trying to blame the Chinese. I'm trying to say the Chinese, to Milt's earlier point, sometimes things that happen organically can be taken advantage of by a third party, by a third nation. I think that's part of it. Also, you all mentioned Brexit. Mohammed and I think Paul recognized I was invited over to Warwick University in Coventry to talk about what do we do going forward post-Brexit regarding national security. And it became completely lost over the past few years because of politics. We all have shared cultural and national interests of maintaining the fabric of our societies, the English society and the democracy, and the American society and our republic. We all have this interest. And yet some of the good ideas we came up with regarding how do we work together going forward in Brexit got lost because of the politics, both sides. So I think this is where, again, we can work together. We need to find issues that we agree upon and focus on those, no matter what else the other side does. Don't worry about what the other guy does, worry about what you can do. And so this is where I think the common ground we've all stayed in touch with regarding over the past few years needs to be what we make our stand on now. We need to make our own stand. It's got to start somewhere. Again, while I lean conservative, I am all for the idea of being open to any resolution that completes and protects our ability to continue to have a valid dialogue where we can work together to find real solutions that go forward. Let's remember, both political extremes don't seek to find solutions. Their primary focus is maintaining the chaos to do things to fundraise and to maintain their power. So it's really kind of kryptonite to both political sides if people can come together and work towards common solutions, because they don't want the solutions. They benefit from not having solutions. This is where I think we can be different. So it may sound a bit controversial, but I think it's something that we should consider. So
we've got two questions actually. One from Tim Wilson, and Tim, do you have a question for Tony or Milton?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it just seems to me that there are a lot of truisms around, and if I can put it this way, lies have been useful in politics forever. I don't think any of us really trusts every politician. Certainly, I would not trust politicians to look after my children. And there's a famous story about LBJ, who said to one of his advisors, "I want you to plant a story about how my opponent has sex with animals." To which his advisor replied, "But that's a lie. He doesn't. He's an honorable man. He doesn't have sex with animals." And LBJ's response was, "I know, but I want to hear him on national media explaining that he doesn't have sex with animals." Lies have a use. And Tony is exactly right. The political use of lies is huge. And the purpose behind them is often obtuse, shall we say. And I am getting to a point here, but I would just also say that finding the truth in many of the great claims that go on in politics is very hard to do, and it often comes, there's this great rush to judgment. You're all aware that in America at the moment we're having a tremendous problem with police shootings and police deaths. The latest one is that bit of truth to come out, and it's taken 4 months, is that Officer Brian Sicknick, who supposedly was murdered in the Capitol riots, which weren't really a riot. Officer Brian Sitnick died of natural causes due to a couple of strokes. That would mean that out of the 5 deaths associated, or 6 deaths associated with those Capitol riots, 4 or 5 were natural causes, and 1 was an unarmed protester who was shot by police inside the Capitol building. That truth is only just starting to come out after 4 months of one party beating the other party over the head for insurrection, rioting, and this disgusting invasion of the sacred and hallowed ground of the Capitol. And forgive me for my slightly irate tone about all of this, but the bottom line is I feel far more sympathy for those people in the various cities where riots have occurred who had their businesses and livings trashed or were hurt or even killed out in the country than I do for our pampered politicians self-righteously proclaiming what's going on. And my question, now I'm finally getting to it, is, has this all gotten worse in this era of instant communication? And is there some way perhaps that we could make at least the mainstream media more accountable for telling the truth when it eventually comes out?
All right. Milton, do you want to respond to Tim? First?
Well, great question. There is no great answer. I think we're, at least at this stage, we're at that point to where there is an outlet for every American taste for information, and I keep going back to when the biggest conflict in the media might have been to read the op-ed page of the New York Times as opposed to the Wall Street Journal, and I've written for both of them. And that was the clash of titans. Today, it's broken down into such thousands of parts, and the internet feeds it, and we've always had this problem, but never the means to expand it to the level that it is now with the internet. I mean, we're on a little piece of the Facebook right now with a live recording. How many other tens of thousands of things are going on Facebook right now? How many people will find this interesting, and how many people will find something else? I mean, I don't know what the answer is. I think, you know, we thought that the telephone would bring the end of the world. And now look where we are. Tony, I don't know, do you have any better shot at that?
No, Milt, I agree with you. I think one of the things to reinforce what Milt says is that people tend to pick a news outlet based on their desire to reinforce their own personal beliefs. So if you believe something, you're going to seek an outlet or a series of outlets that reinforce your personal set of ethics, culture, and what you want to see the world become. And I think this is where I came up in a time where a lot of my professors in college were liberal. I loved them. I'm very close friends with them. And the idea was to create a critical thought. You need to think for yourself. That was their big message. And I think that's the one thing that we need to encourage at the individual level. Think for yourself. My son is 27 years old, 26. He's a fireman in Arlington, Virginia. And he is not woke. He asks hard questions. He wants to know why things are the way they are. He will not simply accept a narrative. And he's told me, he says, Dad, I don't always agree with you, but I do go out and check different sources. So I think that's the thing we need to do. And Milt talked about MSNBC earlier. Look, I watch things on MSNBC. I don't believe them, but I watch them because I want to see what they say. And look, I tweeted earlier today a CNN thing. Fox News has some things they say well, some things they don't. I think we are obligated as individuals to try to establish an understanding based on fact patterns and history of what we can generally depend upon and then verify. Trust but verify. There's a term for you. But I think that we're on our own here because look, I'm big. I like the Daily Mail as one of my sources. I don't always believe him, but just now, President Biden says evidence against Derek Chauvin is overwhelming. That's a political statement by the President of the United States. So do we believe? So what's going on here? We're supposed to have leaders who are supposed to be objective and let the rule of law work its way through. So this is my concern. Both sides do this, by the way. I'm not just blaming Biden. I'm saying this is not fair to the process of justice that we all subscribe to. So this is where I'm saying it's like we have to be smarter than the average bear to try to figure out amongst ourselves what we can agree upon. Objective truth is objective truth. And that's what we have to work to try to shove aside, push aside all the propaganda so we can get to the point of where these are the 5 things we know to be true. Let's start the debate from there. And only then can we actually be honest in our debate, in our ability to come together and work these things. So.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Tony. Rick Stegenberg, you've got a question for Tony or Milt? Rick Stegenberg's in the US. He's head of a veterans organization. So Rick?
No, I have a lot of questions, but I think the discussion about the role of propaganda in the CIA is particularly interesting. I'm wondering if you can talk about Operation Mockingbird and how the spillover of the foreign propaganda that the CIA had planned ended up in the US media, as was referred to in the Church Commission, and the reaction of that in creating the National Endowment for Democracy, which the original director said now carries out some of the same propaganda functions that the CIA used to do.
Well, that, goodness, the Church Committee and Mockingbird go back a good long ways. I'll admit I wasn't at a level at CIA to where I was paying much attention to that at the time. And except that on the receiving end, that was when all hands at CIA were given the order that in fact nothing that was originating from the CIA in terms of covert action should even get into English language newspapers for fear of it getting picked up by another English language newspaper and then into the United States. I think that was always the proper position, is to not let anything that CIA was doing in its set piece game with the Soviet Union or even China at that time begin to propagandize the great American folk. But as far as a comment on goodness on Mockingbird, I don't think I can help you on that one. I mean, all of it, when you get back to the Church Committee, everything from assassination, that was in effect a turning point in American intelligence, the creation of oversight committees, which I thought actually then made them, the unindicted co-conspirators in American intelligence activities, and in fact was a good thing. And I learned to live with the committees in both the Senate and the House, and it turned out to be better for CIA. But I don't know if that addresses everything that you were looking for, but that would be my take on that.
Thanks for that, but I was actually trying to create a thread there about the CIA's propaganda role and how a lot of it was passed on to the NED in 1983 because as a reaction to the Church Commission.
Well, I don't think I can give you a good answer on that. I mean, the NDE picked up, but I was at a level at the Church Committee where I wouldn't have. You probably have researched more of that than I have. I was out chucking lances elsewhere in the world, and I just was getting the instructions on here's what you can't do anymore, or here's what the Church Committee is up to, and it was quite a show on television. I was back one home leave and saw the church committee on TV, and I thought, good grief, this is going to change things, and that's okay. But what it did do is it brought Congress, both houses of Congress, both chambers, into the game, and that was probably a good thing.
So
Well, you obviously looked harder at the National Endowment.
thanks for that both. Henry Strickland, do you have a question?
Yes, Mohammed, can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay, I have it's more of a comment really about how do individuals, as opposed to governments and the population as a whole, how do individuals protect themselves from all of the fake news and disinformation that exists out there, particularly as it was mentioned earlier on that when news is put out on the media, social media, for example, it is all over the place very, very quickly. So there is no time to stop and think about, what have I just read? Does it make sense? Does it sound reasonable? Does it fit with my own experience of the world? Is it likely, etc.? And these sorts of questions, and also obviously it's a single source. So the first thing a responsible journalist would traditionally have done in a newspaper, which comes out only once a day, would be to go off and check your sources, ask 2 or 3 different people. If you get the same answer, it may be true. But, that luxury only exists when you have a certain amount of time to check your facts before you go to press. And now we're in a situation where the news is instantaneous and may not be true. So I just wondered whether anybody has ideas about how individuals can protect themselves and take stock, take the time to take stock and ask themselves the question, is this likely? Or the other, whatever other questions are sensible in that situation.
Right. Who do I pick on first? Tony. I'm going to pick on Tony first, and then Milt.
Yeah, thanks, Henry. Great question. The easiest answer is the most difficult. Is you need to cultivate your own trusted sources. I mean, not everybody can go out and be friends with a reporter, but for those of you who watch my feeds, you kind of know who I like, because I do reflect and tweet their stuff and put it out there. Excuse me. And then the other thing is to look at the reliability of a source. We do this as intelligence officers. We used to have an old system, F1 being, is it F9 or there was all these indicators. I used to write intelligence, CI does cables, we do IIRs, intelligence information reports. And when you do that, you have to always you have source information. Source is reported reliably, XYZ, there's different categories of intelligence reporting. So we used to have a very complex system of vetting of what's true and not. Because as an intelligence officer, your job is to present the best possible factual information. And if a source is bad, it's like, hey, this guy is right 9 times out of 10. That's pretty good. So you need to look at sources who actually get it right consistently. And a number of sources I tweet, I'm very clear on. Some things are just completely absurd on their face. And sometimes it could turn out to be true, but you need to do your own research. I think that's the best thing you can do. And regarding just the overall nature of the media and of this sort of thing that happens, I always try to caution myself about wishful thinking. One of the greatest dangers I've seen by policymakers is confirmation bias. I want to believe this, so therefore this reinforces what I want to believe. I referenced Operation Bodyguard. Hitler wanted to believe that we were going to attack at Pas-de-Calais. And that's so yes, let's reinforce that. Let's make him believe that, so that when we go to Normandy, it takes him a week to figure out this is not a fake, this is really the invasion. So things like that we need to be aware of. Is like the other side tracks how we think, what we think. And if they want us to believe something, they're going to feed something to upset us or throw us off our game. And I've talked to a number of reporters who are on guard for people feeding them information they want to believe, but has to be vetted. So the best reporters always have 2 or 3 sources. They always try to get at least one to go on record. So that's kind of my rule of thumb. If the reporter can get someone on a record and say there's 3 or 4 behind them, that's good. There's reasons for anonymous sources. I used to be, when I first became a whistleblower, I was anonymous for the first 3 months. And what we would do is put out something I said, see what the other side did to respond. And it was ratcheting up. Able danger, you all kind of heard about that. So where there was a methodology used, like, hey, let's throw this out there and see what they do. Let's throw this out there and see what they do. With that said, you know, watching the play-by-play of 2 sides in the media sometimes can be very informative of where this is all going. So that's another thing to keep track of. So that's a very long answer, but I hope that was helpful. Sorry, Milt, over to you.
Yeah, I agree with all that. But I do think that it's that information is more consumer driven now. Used to be that reporters were supposed to tell me something I don't know. Now, most of the consumers go looking for something they want to back up what they already know. And this is, I guess it's an economic pressure on media groups that they still have to sell whatever they're selling, is whether it's newspapers or clicks or whatever. But the old, God, those were wonderful days, Tony, when the sources were A1. That means the source was documentary on the president's desk, and I read it. And then there was the F9 source from a known liar, and the information is probably false. So you had a nice big report that was from an F9, but they all were beautiful except a known liar who's telling a lie. But today, I wonder if we haven't reversed the roles of the collectors and the consumers, that to where it's like our American politics, where this is what you hear in political analysis now, is that the politicians choose their voters rather than the voters electing their politicians. It may be the same thing happening in news because we've got such a broad set of entry points. But it's a hard thing to try to go back to Walter Cronkite and Huntley and Brinkley. Goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. So Adris Anwar, do you have a question? Or Cynthia Wilson? Cynthia or Adris, do you have a question? Thank you for sharing your expertise. So Adris answer says, where there is smoke, there must be fire. So how would you answer that? How would you answer that, Tony or Milt? Where there is smoke, there must be fire. So fake news, so someone can say something. So where there is smoke, there must be fire. How would you respond to that?
Well, if I could just jump in, I have a very short answer to that. A lot of time there's sparks and there may be smoke, but that may not be the main event. That could be actually deceiving you to make you look one way while something else is going on. I mean, arguably, little things can be blown up to huge proportions to distract from other things being looked at. So again, it goes back to consumer beware. You know, this goes to Milt's point. We are consumers, and a lot of the things I think I agree with Milt. A lot of this is consumer driven. Media seems to think there's an audience that they must provide a product to. And if they can find something that's a spark and make it smoke, they'll sell it to you. But so that's why it's very important to ask the harder questions. And by the way, what goes on in England, we don't see here on any given day. We don't. American media just completely ignores what goes on overseas. So it's easy for the American media to kind of distract us from what's going on in other places by just ignoring it. So just because something sparks and it smokes doesn't mean it's super important. So I hope that helps. So
I noticed that, Tony, when I came to the States. I was shocked because there's like whichever news channel I went on, it's like it was all, sometimes it was just news about the state. It wasn't even news about anywhere else. But then again, I suppose your states are quite big. They're like European countries in size or something. So it kind of makes sense in a way. But what didn't make sense was when you put it on like the main channels like CNN or Fox, and they would still only be talking mostly about American stuff. It's like, whereas even if you put BBC on in the UK, you know, for all their greatness and all the rest of it, it's it's like, you know, they do talk about the rest of the world, at least something. And Sky a little bit more. And then, of course, I mean, we've got a few other channels like France 24 and things like that, which actually are very international in their outlook. So we do get exposure to that a lot more than in America. And of course, I mean, that's what people are exposed to on a day-to-day basis. I mean, their world is like just going to be whatever's happening in America. And of course, I mean, from this side of the Atlantic, often when we get American news, it's often stuff that when I actually went to America and I saw how things are in America, I'm like, well, that's not what's being reported in Britain necessarily. You know, some of the stuff is actually batshit crazy, and it's not really a real picture of America.
So Timothy Wilson says, burying the news under other items, and those are called news dumps. Rick Stagenberg, the purpose is to release news they don't want people to notice. Now's the time when people follow the news the least closely. I just want to go to one of our guests, Dr. Afzal Ashraf. Do you have a question for Milt or Tony?
Yes, I want to ask them if they believe that fake news is a product of our democratic system. And the reason I ask that is they've given us some very interesting and very relevant examples of what they described as sort of disinformation and misinformation in the context of psychological warfare, in the context of other covert operations in support, I hope, of legitimate foreign policy and security objectives. But my observation is that we are beginning to use the term fake news, largely thanks to dear old President Trump. And he did this when he applied the label against a whole section of media that was against him. So if we're talking about fake news or disinformation or misinformation as being weaponizing information, he was carpet bombing an entire worldview, an entire political spectrum. And I think he was largely effective in it. And why is fake news a problem? Why was he successful? Well, because as we've already heard, I think from several good examples that Tony, Milton and others have given, and that is that politicians have lied to their publics. And politicians are expected to lie, and the public expect them to lie. But when they lie to preserve their own power, that's one thing. But when they lie to change public opinion, that is quite another. And here in the UK, we've had, of course, the Iraq War and many what are obvious lies revealed as a result of that. In the US, you have the Vietnam War, you have the Iraq War, and even the Afghan War to some degree, all of which were only possible through the construction of public support through disinformation, especially designed disinformation. And what that I think has done is put a big question mark in the public's about the authority, the word authority, full stop, we look to our leadership for authority. And so when you have no source of authoritative information, you look for alternative sources. And that's why we have this tribalism appearing. We have echo chambers being created. So anyway, I wanted to just explain my question, and I wanted to sort of couch it in the terms of democracy, because what we have in democracy is not really the principles of democracy where individuals are able to vote for power. We are effectively subcontracting power to a political party for a period of years. And what they do is buy that lease by telling us a narrative and then failing to deliver on it. And so I think that at the heart of all of this, is it not the future of democracy at stake?
Okay.
Take a little quick shot. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think that this is a continuum to where we're pressing at the edge of the envelope in our democratic states. And in fact, the concept of fake news is something you really, as we understand it, you really won't find in China or even Russia today. It's here, it's us, and to a certain extent, the other democratic states. And it is down to the politicians selecting their voters, creating all these little stovepipes of people that provide power and outlet. Fake news, I mean, that started off, we all know where that started. It was a declaration by the 45th president about any report that didn't shed a good light on him. And it's picked up. You know, there's no relationship between fake news and the old disinformation. Fake news is on its own. Disinformation has a relationship to misinformation based on where the consumer lies along that particular line of information. But fake news is, I'm not even sure it exists. Does it? Was there really fake news in the last 4 years? Maybe there was, but I would throw that out to the others. What was the biggest example of fake news in the American context?
Well, Milt, I'll jump into that, and I think I disagree with you a little bit by the fact that if you look back, and someone had texted in the chat that the Iraq war and some of the things the wing commander brought up just now was essentially manufacturing consent for war. It was manufacturing. Manufacturing to me then, if you're manufacturing something, you're creating something. So, and look, we have to look no further than what happened with the New York Times, where the Bush administration was hand feeding, giving them information. And my own personal experience on this is very clear. I was a military planner on the invasion of Iraq. And I remember sitting in one of the rooms where I'll never forget, John Sadler, Colonel Sadler walks in and says, the war's going to be over in 30 days. We have to start figuring out how to put our mission into the embassy. And we're all sitting there, it's like, you've got to be mad. But that's the thing. There were people inside the administration, the Office of Special Plans, Doug Feith, and I've talked to the principals here. I've talked to Don Rumsfeld about this. This isn't me not understanding. There was a concerted effort by Doug Feith to create fake information, taking little nuggets, little sparks, making them into smoke, and presenting them to media for purposes of creating consensus, fake news. So I just think the Trump way he packaged it maybe was inconvenient. But we have a history of seeing information manufactured that is fake. Is there grains of truth in it? Absolutely. But those grains aren't the reality which we have to face. And don't take my comments as being anything but trying to examine the reality which we live. I went to combat. I would go to combat again, as long as I believe it's a righteous need to use military force to achieve a political objective. in this case, it was not a necessary political objective that we all got roped in on, you know. We got roped into it. And by the way, I've said this on Milt. I said this one time I was on BBC with Hamid Gul, and I talked about, man, here the British are here for the third round of the Afghan work, man. You know, I guess you all didn't learn the first couple times. So, you know, there's reasons why we get committed as individuals to work in a greater cause. A lot of the time, I would argue that there is information that's manufactured to convince us to take certain actions. So I don't know if that helps answer the question or not, but that's kind of how I see the situation.
The only argument I would have is that I think I agree that with all of those observations on the run up to the Iraq War, and I've seen that stuff all through 30 years of being with CIA, but the fake news idea, I think, was introduced in the last 4 years, and maybe I don't throw in the same thing the issue you just raised as part of the fake news. And yes, where there's smoke, there's a smoke generator. I mean, okay, I get it. But I look at fake news as sort of a part of the cheap political battle between politicians. You could, yeah. Let me think about that. What you've just done. That's a piece where I'll have to think it over whether that's fake news in my definition. But yeah, we get into wars and stay in them for reasons that sell. And I've been in that same office and looking over to the right at Don Rumsfeld and across at Doug Feith, and then Wolfowitz kind of right in here somewhere in the middle of the table. All of that. I've been to those too, and had the same exact experience before we went into, while we were in Afghanistan and before we went to Iraq, and I did the same thing. I said, this Afghan thing, I can see you're going to have big problems ahead, but the Iraq thing, do you want to do that? And that meeting ended very quickly. I don't know how long you lasted in your meeting on that, but mine didn't.
Well, I was not very popular, so.
Yeah.
So that's good. Sun Tzu basically asked, what would be the strengths and weaknesses? What would be the opportunities for a victim of fake news? Tony.
A victim? Oh God, but Sun Tzu was the master at that. I mean, he always pointed that the last thing that you should do to win a battle is actually fight one. And it all involved manipulating your enemy, even up to the point of battle where you had to pick the high ground with the sun at your back. But it all starts out with his first treatise on that is Zhi by Zhang by Sheng is what it is. It's know yourself and know your enemy. In 100 battles, you'll have 100 victories. And it all begins with that kind of thing. And I don't know that we've ever learned that lesson.
I mean, one of his opening statements in one of the chapters is, if your enemy is secure at all points, be prepared for him. If he is superior in strength, evade him. So the thing is, in a democracy, because we're kind of, I guess, we allow all kinds of information to travel through and everywhere, it's much easier for us to be victims, I think, of fake news here in the West or in democracies. I mean, you look at Pakistan now, or even India, there's so much fake news going on between those countries and within the countries as well.
But it's usually, in Pakistan and India, it's usually about each other, whereas
Yes.
of course, there is a wild and woolly press in both countries, but you don't see this in China, what you're talking about. I mean, about things that are fake news that are domestic Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the whole China thing, we could do that another time.
Oh yeah, we should.
But because, I mean, yeah, we had a Cold War with the Soviets from Churchill at Fulton, Missouri, up until the Berlin Wall fell and beyond for another year. But the Chinese thing, I mean, look, we're their biggest trading partner at the same time, and they're so much more subtle. They read Sun Tzu, he was Chinese, and then they can play us like a fiddle on that kind of stuff without any fingerprints. Or you have to really look for the fingerprints, but you know, that's another story. They are very good at the game, very good. May have invented it.
Fake news is kind of banned in China, as I understand it. I mean, it's like you dare not publish anything that hasn't been vetted by the Central Committee.
Exactly.
It just, you won't be around very long.
I'm just thinking, shall we go to Indonesia? There's Manover Aziz and Muhammad Sani Qudsi from Indonesia joining us. So do you want to go for it, Muhammad Sani? You want, let me unmute you. You want to ask a question for Milton or Tony?
Actually, I joined quite late since I just finished my meetings, so I'm sorry for that. And the first time I joined the Zoom meeting is I heard the statement from Mr. Henry that about how to counter disinformation, hoaxes, fake news, and everything. The problem here, I think, is the level of literation in society. I mean, people can read, people can understand easily how to do things nowadays compared to back then when we were in the Middle Age. But the problem is the concept of knowing what's to check and what's to believe nowadays is pretty much still low. That's what happened in mainly I see it in Indonesia. For example, actually I kind of see the reference on Sheikh Paul's wallpaper, you know, the UFO thingy. The thing is, people tend to like believe the imagination, the overblown truth. That's why I write it as an overblown truth. There's some grain of truth there, but most people likes drama. You know, if I say you, Mr. Abbasi, you rob a store, people doesn't really gonna to like, you know, what the hell, blah blah blah. But if the media portray it as a Pakistani British guy robbing a store in the daylight in Ramadan, people will buy it. You know, it's an overblown truth. And then if the news came out, let's say not in public but throughout from one or certain people, and it going on, people tend to have, you know, some kind of additional information that they think it's true, or maybe just their analysis, but they forgot to mention it. So in the end, it's become disinformation, and then it's become fake
one
news.
other thing, yeah. So what I'm thinking, I mean, what kind of victims have they been on fake news or disinformation, misinformation? What kind of impressions have maybe media or fake news people given about Indonesia or how Indonesians are?
Well, one thing for sure, there's actually a news. I think people may be quite aware of it, that lately Microsoft has released a statement that Indonesian netizens are the least friendly in Southeast Asia. Indonesian netizen, yeah. And suddenly people were like attacking Microsoft, and there's a meme out of it and said that Microsoft is too good. They released a statement, and after 15 minutes they get the proof. There's a lot of from there people, I can see that many Indonesian people are having this, we call it what is called a sumbu pendek means in English. Well, basically it's a short fuse kind of thing. So if you light it up, it's going to explode fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, what kind of question would you have for Tony or Milton? What kind of question?
I was wondering if there's a way that we can actually having a way to fast to get the truth fast. Let's say some kind of hoax coming up, and normally the misinformation gonna like spreading out, but there's currently there's almost no way to check the truth directly.
So like immediate, like an immediate kind of response. So fake news comes out.
Immediate.
For example.
Yes, exactly.
So
Immediate kind of responses.
Yeah. So is there a system in place, Milt or Tony, or is there a system being looked at that we can find a way of quickly responding to fake news with something that's truthful? What's the best way to do that?
The first shot and then flip it to Tony. I think the problem is that, let me take the American population. I think here in 2021, we're less informed than we might have been even before the internet. There is so much that I think we end up as a poorly informed population, so that whether it's fake news or misinformation or disinformation will find its select audience. And it is so massive now, the choice of how one becomes informed, that I think we end up uninformed or misinformed. And I don't know what the solution is to that. How do you tell a population of 330 million people, get smarter?
Yeah.
You know, be smarter than you are. You're not smart enough to handle this. I don't know what the answer to that is.
So people, well, I'll just put Milt out as part of one of the answers. People like Milt, when they hear something, if they simply say, I don't believe this, I need more information, that should be a first indicator that maybe something's fake. Milt and we're not always right, but the thing is, like, I think some people have a nose for understanding there's something not right here. And it's just asking that question, is this right? And then even if it's fake, you can't dispute it necessarily and stop it, but you can make people ask questions and say, I don't know if this is true. I think there's something wrong here. And let me give two specific examples I've had to deal with over the past week. I testified, my testimony is public, in front of the Pennsylvania legislature on election insecurity issues. And I talk in there about how a foreign threat is going to examine the observed vulnerabilities of our political voting system to manipulate and use against us in the next election. Now, what I didn't say, but people will get upset about, is like, well, that you're implying then that somehow someone in the system either left something unaddressed or vulnerable. And the answer is, yeah, because a foreign adversary is going to look at that and how do I take advantage of it? Milton and I would do that. If we were told, hey, go look at Venezuela and figure out how to mess them up, I'd look at that. So I try to learn from their own vulnerabilities. So what I said was not fake news. It was not bad, but people got upset about it because I was pointing out an inconvenient issue and I was attacked, and I'm going to be attacked. Another thing I said today is like, hey, Black Lives Matter. They've raised over $1 billion and they have yet to spend a single dime on opportunity centers in major metropolitan areas for Black communities. Well, that's boy howdy, that's true, but people don't like hearing that. Well, I'm just saying, we should have the ability to not only dispute something we see as fake and have the courage to ask the question. You say you're doing this, are you? People, what has happened is that So many things happen in society that a mob will come on to you if you don't buy into something. Oh, that must be true, and if you dispute it, you're the enemy, and they'll attack you. Or if you ask a question with legitimate, like, hey, this doesn't look right to me, you become the target. I talked to two senior members of the military over the last couple of days. One is a former commandant of the Army War College. One is a former chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And they're both afraid to say anything publicly, because if you upset someone by speaking the truth or disputing something, you become the target. So this is one thing I can say honestly. We must all have the courage of our convictions to speak up against the mob mentality and ask the hard questions, or dispute facts, or dispute issues which don't seem factually supported.
Thanks for that, Tony.
You know, Mohammed,
Sure.
Tony's really hit the nail just quickly, is that everything becomes political now, whether it's finances of Black Lives Matter, or I wrote an article on the bounties and saying it was bogus. And people turned that into a big political position that I had taken. It wasn't. It was. I said, here's why. It doesn't make sense. It isn't. This is not a good story. Go look for a better story. But the point is, I was then taking a position on, I guess, on Trump's handling of it. And that then sets up the battle lines once again. So it is what we're being asked to do is to say, hey, wait a minute, this is nonsense. That's a smoke generator. That's not a spark that set off a grass fire. Then you become the issue. So that's we're in a very strange time in our tribal country. And I've lived among the tribes for a lot of my life, and the most tribal country I've ever lived in right now is the one I'm living in.
Wow. So one of the we've got two questions. One from Zach Tanveer from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, followed by Rubab Mehdi from Islamabad. So Zach, do you want to ask a question of our panelists?
Yeah, Muhammad, thank you so much for letting me speak. The thing is, as the experts here are talking about the fake news and disputing the sources, but the problem is at the grassroots level. The problem is with the common people, the people working in the factories, people working in the fields, and people, taxi drivers. It's really difficult to educate them. It's really difficult to tell them. And to spread the fake news, all you need is a website and a hot headline and a catchy thumbnail. These three things are enough to spread the fake news. And unfortunately, we have seen that back in May 2017 in India, a fake WhatsApp news claimed the lives of 7 people. 7 people were lynched to death in India. So this is happening at a very massive level, and we're not sure how we can educate and warn the common people and the common people about the rumor mongering. Hopefully our experts can, shed some light on this.
So you being in Saudi Arabia has kind of been targeted by fake news as well.
Yeah.
And misinformation, disinformation, etc. There was a comment by Adris Anwar. If you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. If you do read it, you're misinformed. Washington. So we could say the same thing about the internet, actually. So if you don't read the internet, you're uninformed. If you do read the internet, you're misinformed. Okay, but I was just thinking, Zach, do you want to give an example of kind of fake news that Saudis have been targeted?
Yeah, the famous example is of this MBS has been targeted many times. And when we go and read the news, we find that it's all based on anonymous sources, as Mr. Tony Shaffer has highlighted about the anonymous sources. So it's all based on anonymous sources, and it's really difficult to tell the common people, going and telling them that you have to verify this. The problem is the common people don't have time. They don't have time. All they read is the headline and the picture, that's it, and they spread it on WhatsApp. So this is really a very big problem.
So, Rubab Mehdi from Islamabad. Are you here, Rubab?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
You want to switch your
Thank you.
camera on if possible?
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay.
No, that's fine.
Yeah. So very quickly, I mean, what I'm concerned about is half-truths. And we do understand the importance of the media. And as bridge builders, we try to see the importance of those who make the media, the politicians who are the legislators, they make the laws, and the people who consume the media. So we try to become the link between those as people who are trying to build bridges. My concern is, of course, and I've said this many times, that unfortunately, it is not easy to be a bridge builder. The money is in conflict and in half-truths. A recent example is France and a civil war-like scenario that has been created in Pakistan. For example, in the news from France that was broadcast in Pakistan was, of course, of the cartoons. But what was not broadcast was that an 80-year-old woman was beheaded in a church who had nothing to do with blasphemy. And had her news been broadcast in Pakistan, very few people would have tolerated such violence against an elderly woman. And some compassion, the news would have generated. Then, at the same time, in the West, it has not been shown how the Pakistani Prime Minister has stood for the minorities. He was one of the very few voices who spoke out for ASEA. So the fact that he stood up for the minorities and then he is trying to get the sentiments of the Muslims respected is something. So I think these half-truths and what I was trying to, if there is a way in which the politicians and the media groups stop signing to a West-East divide, and if there is some way in which the news which brings people together rather than divides them and the voices that bring people together can be amplified. And yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, Rubab, with Pakistan. I mean, what kind of fake news has Pakistan been targeted with recently, either within Pakistan or outside, directed towards Pakistan or Pakistanis?
As I said, most of the news that is circulated, not just I think the voices that are on ground are ignored. The fact that most people would want to have, and the voices on the ground are ignored, and it is selective sharing of media. Like I said, the groups and the vigilante justice and the mobs would be shown, but not the facts leading to it.
Okay, so would you have a question for Milt or Tony specifically?
Yes, on corporate good, and if there is a way that just the way that the way at this moment in time, the voices that stand with truth, justice, minorities are isolated. If there is any way through corporate good, some bridge building, some hope, some positive news, and if the media can be used as a positive forum to bring people, that is my question to both.
Okay. So Tony and Milt, would you answer that to Rubab?
So I'll take a shot at it first. I think one of the things that I think we all need to recognize, and I've spoken with Mohammed, and he can attest to this a lot, that I always try to put my answers, especially regarding religious issues, into a larger framework that people can understand. And one of the things that I've said often is like, look, the people who are most victimized by radical Islam is Islam. And I think this information that comes from the attempt to shape an answer around a religious belief is a difficult thing. And so when you talk about the idea that a woman is beheaded and that being left out of the story to create a certain perception is bad. That's wrong. It shouldn't be happening like that. And that's why I always say, look, you have people in Islam who are appalled by the violence, and violence must be something we all seek to end, no matter what it is. And I've joked with Paul before. I often, when I go out and talk about religion, it's like, hey, I'm a Druid. I've converted to being a Druid. What do you think about that? You know, how does that make you feel? Because I you know, maybe I will commit to be a Druid, because the idea is my personal beliefs, as long as they don't impact on you, shouldn't affect you in any way. And I think this is where, regarding the public, regarding the larger effort of people to shape a certain thing, we need to be very accepting of other people's beliefs, as long as they don't result in violence. And if they result in violence, then we have to point out how that everybody in that religion is not guilty of the violence. We need to focus on those elements of the religion which conduct the violence, and then work as a team to end it. And I think that's where often this goes back to Milton's point about tribalism. This is a way to get tribes fired up. Oh, they hate us. It's like, no. We don't hate you. It's just that we hate violence, and we need to be careful to make sure that we only go after the source of violence, not the religion. So I hope that may help put some perspective on it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you that on that, especially on the issue of the use of violence, you know, with like religious justification. You guys in the US have got enough issues, I think, with your own fundamentalists who claim to be following Christianity. So it's all, you know, it's all. I think we're all in the same boat on that. Right. Who else for a question? Fadl Takruri is joining us from Warwick. So the university that you went to, Tony, Fadl's here. Fadl Takruri, do you have a question?
Hi, good evening, and nice to join you. I'm sorry I'm a little bit late. I was driving back from London. Just
Can we see
really
your wonderful face? Can we see your face?
my internet is intermittent, you know, really bad, and that's why I try to minimize the bandwidth. Just to congratulate you and carry on, keep trying to understand why and how, why we have the problem, but how we sort it. That's all, really.
Okay. You must have a question. I mean, when you're talking to me, Fadl, you always have questions.
It's why. The question which bedevils me is why we end up where we end up. Is it, you know, and it's probably a philosophical question, is why we end up here, why we couldn't see it before, and is it going to repeat itself? These are the questions that institutions, government, and leaders should be groveling with, rather than the reactive to how we just respond to, you know, to the symptoms. Treat the cause, in my view. How do we treat the cause?
So, Tony or Milton, how do we treat the cause?
What a nice question. It sort of folds into, at least here in America, about what we were talking about on the last round, is America being essentially Judeo-Christian rather than Abrahamic. I don't think that most of our people who I have been beat up unmercifully for calling Christian Taliban would would like to admit even that we're all in the Abrahamic fold. I'm not sure that we're going to be able to make that leap to where we're all in this together anytime soon. I think it has to be a goal, but I don't think we're going to get there. This is more on the last question from Islamabad, but I think we're at a very tricky point in the American part of this game, and I'm not sure that we're going to make any progress anytime soon.
Yeah, just to continue what Bill's saying, I think we're here because we're having this discussion by the very fact that I think we recognize that something's wrong, and we all are wanting to do something to try to make it better, no matter who we are regarding our beliefs. And as Milt said, I think many of us have the same basic DNA in our faith in the universe and God, and the God I worship, I subscribe to, does not believe in using violence for purposes of creating someone to believe the same as you. Somehow, I think that the idea of forcing someone to believe is a bad idea, and I think maybe that's the common element, is that the best religions are those that create followers by attraction, not by apprehension or intimidation. And I think that's the common thread, is that we're here because we want to be here. Nobody's telling us. Milton and I aren't here. Muhammad's not here. Paul's not here. We're not here because someone told us to be here. We're here because we have the belief that we all can act of our own accord to seek something better, to speak up. And I think that's the significant thread that holds us all together, no matter how our specific faith is applied. We volunteer for this. We're here because we want to do this. And I think that's the thing we should focus on. How do we work together then as volunteers to stop the political Islam or radical Islam that sees victimization? And look, we have some of this in the Christian faith too. I mean, it's just a little bit different. It's not quite as overt or violent. It's more economic manipulation than anything else. But I think the fact that we're here as volunteers speaks volumes of what the solution can be for us.
But we all have to overcome some very old prejudices and lessons badly learned. I went 12 years to Catholic schools, and I think that every football team, in every league that I was ever involved in, a football team or a basketball team would have been named the Crusaders. Because, I mean, what could have been better than to have been a Crusader, unless you happened to have been in Jerusalem after Pope Urban decided to send a bunch of guys, fun-loving guys, off to do what they did. But I mean, it's those kinds of understandings that have to at least evolve, if not be overcome. My God, the Crusaders, yeah, wow.
Wow. It's funny.
I think also, speaking from a Muslim perspective, that's something that Muslims also have to educate ourselves about. The fact that a word like, for instance, in America, if you say you're going to have a crusade on poverty, it's a good thing. It might be a bad choice of words internationally, but it is actually a good thing. Just like, I mean, a Muslim in a Muslim country could actually say they're going to have a jihad on poverty. And they don't mean anybody's going to pick up a gun. They just want to feed people. It's a struggle. But again, I mean, if you say that in Britain or America, that's kind of like, what the hell is going on? Because we have a different understanding of these terms. And I think there is a problem here with education. We really need to invest more in education in all our countries around the world and in all our societies. Education that actually teaches people to have critical reasoning skills and to also be able to understand people from different communities. I mean, it's like, as Tony touched on earlier, in the US, there's an issue where media isn't broadcast from outside of the US. It's very patchy. I think PBS is one of the few that does broadcast elsewhere. The rest of the world does exist, and they're not all our enemies. And except for there's a few channels that broadcast very quaint English stuff that's nothing like how we actually are today. And that's another thing. But I mean, there's an issue there with education and teaching people about all kinds of different communities around the world. And there are some efforts, I know in the US and also in the UK, where they've tried to bring this into school curriculums and stuff. But there's so much more that needs to be done in this area, because, I mean, even here, if I talk to people in my area where I live, most of them don't know outside of Wolverhampton, never mind, you know, like outside of, you know, or Birmingham. It's like anything, you know, London, it's a bit strange to them. Anything from Scotland would be a bit strange to them. And yet there are also other communities in the UK where people are a lot more educated. They've had the opportunity to go to better schools. And their take on the world is very broad and educated. Really what we need, the ideal is that we get our populations across the board to have that kind of education, that kind of understanding. But of course, I mean, how do we get there? I mean, this is, it's a big gulf between where we should be and where we are. And what worries me is something that both Milton and Tony have touched on earlier, is the fact that this is actually putting our very democracies at stake. Our very systems at stake, because this needs to have educated citizenry. If the citizens are not educated and cannot discern what is true from what is false, then how can they make an educated decision when voting time comes? Our leaders come from the people. I think this is something the Prophet Muhammad himself said. It's also something that other people have said in the past, but it's a fact. Our leaders come from the people. If the people aren't educated, then the people that actually put themselves forward as leaders are not going to be educated. And then what we're going to end up with is people in government, people who are actually running us, who also don't know how things are, who don't understand the rest of the world. And it is very dangerous. And I worry, I really worry, because where we're actually going to end up from all of this. Because our societies, if we sort this problem out, have such potential. But on the other hand, if we don't sort this out, we don't know how long it's going to be around.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Tony. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to gently start wrapping up. So if there's any comments from Milton or Tony, any final comments, where do we go from here? And then we'll start wrapping up. If there's any other questions from anyone, if you can email them to me or message them to me, I'm going to pass them on to Milton or Tony, and I'll connect you guys up on email as well. So anyone, any I was going to say any last comments, anyone?
Just Milt, I appreciate being here with you. It's always an honor to join a legend like you in a forum like this, and I appreciate your service and your courage. You've been someone, no matter the politics, have spoken out, and I appreciate that. And I think that that's part of my answer in my closing. Be like Milt, speak up, be out there, do the right thing. No, I'm being completely serious about this. People of great moral fiber must also back it up with moral courage. And I appreciate you, Mohammed, for sponsoring this. Milt, thank you for your being here. And I think this is where it starts. We need to have this dialogue of conscientious individuals who want to try to do this. Again, we're volunteers. And so again, Mel, thank you for being here. Paul, thank you. And thank you, Mohammed, for having me on.
Well,
Thanks,
thank you, as always, and thank you, Mohammed, for setting this up. What a very lively discussion about some
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, I was looking for an excuse to get Milt and Tony together anyway, so I thought, what better to do? And also with Henry and Dr. Afzal and of course Paul. And by the way, thanks Paul and the University of Birmingham for helping us put this together. If it wasn't for Paul, nothing would like this would be happening, would it, Paul?
Sure. So thank you, Milton and Tony. It's really good to see you, and I really enjoyed it. I've learned a lot from you guys this evening, so thank you.
It's really appreciative, and I can see Dr. Safi was here. I bet he had a question, but Dr. Safi, if you could maybe message it to me, and I will pass that on. I'll be happy to connect you guys up. And thank you, everyone. Thanks very much for this. And let's see if we can build on these conversations further. Thanks again, everyone. And I'm going to close up now. So we'll let Milt and Tony have their cups of tea. Tea, not coffee. Thanks, everyone.
I'm going for a run now, just saying. So
You go for it. You go for it. Right. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank
time.
you. Thanks.
Thanks very much. There you go.